Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, not to a gilded age of innovation and progress, but to the murky underbelly of the Victorian era, where the phrase making a living took on a disturbingly literal and often disgusting meaning. We're talking about jobs so strange, so stomach-churning, you'd probably lose your lunch just thinking about them. This is a world where survival meant getting your hands dirty in ways you can barely imagine. A place where a good day's work might involve wading through human waste or digging up a fresh grave. It's a world you would most definitely not want to survive in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where and when you're listening from in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the cobbled streets of New York City in the year 1878, a time when the city is a living, breathing, and often malodorous beast. The air, thick with the smell of coal smoke, horse manure, and unwashed humanity, bites at your nose. You pull the brim of your worn cap down, trying to blend in with the throngs of people who rush past, each with a purpose you can't quite grasp. You're new here, a recent arrival from the rural countryside, and the city's sheer scale is overwhelming. The gas lamps hiss to life, casting long, dancing shadows on the brick walls, and you can feel the city's heart beating beneath your worn leather boots. But it's not a healthy, rhythmic beat. It's a chaotic, feverish thrum. You've been looking for work for days, your pockets getting lighter with each passing meal, and the desperation is starting to set in like a cold, clammy hand on your back. A man, his face a web of deep-set wrinkles and his clothes stained with something you'd rather not identify, leans against a lamppost, watching you. His eyes, the color of a muddy river, meet yours, and a thin, knowing smile spreads across his face, revealing a few missing teeth. He pushes himself off the post, his movements surprisingly spry for his age. "Looking for work, are ya? Son," he rasps, his voice like gravel. You nod, your throat too tight to speak. "I've got just the thing for a strong lad like you. Pays well, too. You just gotta have a strong stomach." He gestures with a gnarled hand toward a sewer grate, a dark, yawning mouth in the middle of the street. You catch a whiff of what lies below, a stench so profound it makes your eyes water. It's the smell of everything the city discards, a concentrated miasma of waste, rot, and forgotten things. He introduces himself as Silas, and the job he's offering is one that few would dare to consider. He calls himself a tosher, a scavenger of the sewers. While the rest of the city lives and works above ground, the toshers operate in a dark, fetid world below, sifting through the city's refuse for anything of value. Your first instinct is to refuse, to run back to the surface world and find a more respectable, less disgusting job. But the hunger in your belly, a constant, gnawing presence, is a powerful motivator. Silas sees the hesitation in your eyes and laughs, a dry, rattling sound. It's honest work, son, just underground. He promises a decent wage for your first day, enough to get a proper meal and a bed for the night. The thought of a warm bed, a luxury you haven't experienced in weeks, seals the deal. You agree. And with a grunt of satisfaction, Silas leads you to a manhole cover a few blocks away, an almost invisible scar on the city's face. The manhole cover is a heavy, cast-iron circle, its surface slick with a layer of grime. It takes both of you, straining and grunting, to pry it open, revealing a black void that seems to swallow the dim light of the street. The smell is even worse now, a dense, palpable thing that assaults every one of your senses. Silas lights a small lantern, its flickering flame casting long, grotesque shadows on the brick walls of the sewer entrance. The tunnel before you is just wide enough for two people to walk side by side, and the floor is a squishy, unknown substance. As you descend the rusted ladder, the sound of the city above fades away, replaced by the gurgling and sloshing of the subterranean rivers of waste. You find yourself in a world of perpetual twilight, lit only by the weak glow of your lantern. The air is thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of decay. Your feet squish with every step, and you try not to think about what exactly you're stepping in. Silas, however, seems perfectly at home, navigating the darkness with the practiced ease of a man who has spent more time down here than up above. He holds his lantern high, illuminating the slick, brick-lined walls of the sewer, a marvel of engineering that was meant to carry the city's waste away, not to be a workplace. He points to the ground, a churning river of detritus and filth, and says, "That's our gold, right there. You just got to look for it." He explains the process. You're not looking for money or jewelry, at least not directly. You're looking for anything that could be sold. Buttons, coins, forgotten rings, even bits of valuable metal that people have accidentally flushed down their toilets. A common joke among Toshers is that the city's sewers contain more lost fortunes than its banks. Historians still debate whether this was a genuine belief or just a morbid coping mechanism for the grim reality of their work. You find yourself wondering if any of the treasures you find will be worth the feeling of this filth squishing between your toes. Your first find is a small, tarnished silver spoon half buried in the muck. You pick it up with 2 fingers, a grimace on your face, and hold it up to the light. It's bent and covered in a thick layer of grime, but Silas's eyes light up. That's a good one, a couple hours of polishing, and that'll fetch a fine price. He tells you that every find, no matter how small, adds up. The goal is to collect as much as you can before the tide of waste, which rises and falls with the city's daily rhythms, gets too high and forces you back to the surface. It's a race against the clock, a constant battle against the river of filth. You can hear the distant rumble of the city above, a reminder of the world you've temporarily left behind. It's a world that doesn't care about you or the dirty, thankless work you're doing. It just keeps flushing. You press on, your sense of disgust slowly giving way to a strange, almost numb focus. You start to see patterns in the flow of the waste, learning where the more valuable items tend to settle. Silas teaches you how to use a long, hooked pole to sift through the deeper piles, a technique that saves you from having to plunge your hands into the thickest parts of the muck. The darkness and the confined space, which initially felt so oppressive, start to feel normal. The gurgling of the sewers becomes a sort of background music, a soundtrack to your grim work. You find a few more spoons, a brass button from a military uniform, and even a small porcelain doll's head, its painted eyes staring blankly at you from the depths of the waste. It's a strangely poignant find, a relic of a child's lost toy, now just another piece of junk in the city's massive toilet. You toss it into your sack, a small gesture of respect for the unknown child who once loved it. As you continue your search, Silas shares a common historical fact about the sewer systems. He tells you about how the city's sewers weren't originally designed for human waste, but rather as storm drains to prevent flooding. It was only later, as the city grew and the smell became unbearable, that they were adapted to carry away the waste from the city's homes. This bit of common knowledge, a fact you've heard whispered on the streets, now takes on a new, more immediate meaning as you wade through the results of that decision. He also tells you a little-known detail. Some parts of the sewer system are so old and unstable that they've been bricked up, creating forgotten labyrinths that only the most daring toshers would venture into. These lost tunnels, he says, are rumored to contain the greatest treasures. Lost for decades, just waiting to be found. But they're also incredibly dangerous, prone to collapse, and filled with pockets of poisonous gas. You decide right then and there that you'll stick to the safer, if equally disgusting, paths. Hours pass, marked only by the growing weight of your sack and the increasing fatigue in your muscles. You've found a surprising number of coins, mostly pennies and a few dimes, all caked in filth, but still recognizable. The silver spoon you found earlier is a bit of a fluke, a testament to the random luck of a tosher's life. You learn that most of the work is just tedious sifting, a constant, low-level grind for a few pennies here and there. But every once in a while, there's a small glimmer of hope, a flash of something shiny that makes the work worth it. Silas says the best finds are often near the wealthiest parts of town, where people are more likely to lose a fancy pocket watch or a gold ring. The thought of finding something truly valuable keeps you going, a small spark of greed in the midst of all the grime. Silas, your guide in this foul new world, tells you a story about a famous tosher named Old Man Higgins, who supposedly found a bag filled with gold coins and disappeared, never to be seen again. The story is a bit of a local legend, a hopeful tale passed down among the desperate, a sort of lottery ticket for the eternally unlucky. But even in the midst of the grime and the stench, you can't help but feel a flicker of that hope. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to find the next big score. You're not just a scavenger anymore. You're an adventurer in a forgotten kingdom, a modern-day treasure hunter, albeit one covered in a thick layer of, well, you know. It's a good way to trick your mind into continuing the work, a little self-delusion to get you through the day. Your stomach rumbles again, but this time, it's not just from hunger. It's a sort of protest, a visceral rejection of the environment you're in. You're now completely numb to the smell, a phenomenon Silas calls sewer blindness, where your nose just gives up trying to process the stench. You can feel the cold water seeping through your boots, a constant, chilling reminder of where you are. Silas checks his pocket watch, its gleaming face a stark contrast to the filth all around you. Time to go. Sun, the tide's coming in. He points to a subtle rise in the water level, a sign that the city's plumbing is starting its evening flush. The flow is getting stronger, the gurgling turning into a low roar. You retrace your steps, your sack heavy on your shoulder, and climb back up the rusted ladder. The sight of the night sky, dotted with a few timid stars, feels like a revelation. The air, though still far from clean, feels like a fresh breeze. The smell of horse manure on the street is almost pleasant compared to the miasma you just left. You and Silas struggle to put the manhole cover back in place, and with a final, satisfying clang, you seal off the world you've just come from. You feel like a survivor, a veteran of a war fought in the dark. Silas counts the day's take and hands you a handful of coins. It's more money than you've seen in weeks, enough for a warm meal, a few drinks, and a proper bed. The money, though it smells faintly of the sewer, feels like a weight of freedom in your hand. He claps you on the shoulder. See, I told you, good work for a strong lad. He smiles, and this time, you feel a genuine sense of camaraderie with him. He tells you to meet him at the same spot tomorrow night if you're up for it. The thought of doing it all again is a bit daunting, but the thought of the money is even more compelling. You find a small, bustling tavern, the warmth and the chatter a welcome contrast to the cold and silence of the sewer. You order a hot stew and a frothy beer, and as you eat, you can't help but notice the people around you. They're all so clean, so oblivious to the dark, churning world beneath their feet. They laugh and talk about their day, their jobs, their lives, completely unaware that people like you and Silas exist to sift through their discarded lives. The experience has given you a new perspective, a strange sense of ownership over the city. You know its secrets, its hidden pathways, its dirty little truths. You're an essential part of its functioning, even if no one knows you exist. You're the unflushable, a scavenger in the belly of the beast. And tonight, you sleep well, dreaming of tarnished silver and forgotten gold. You wake up to the sound of church bells, a gentle melodic clang that cuts through the lingering hum of the city. The bed you're in, though simple, feels like the lap of luxury after weeks of sleeping on hard-packed ground, or in the cold, damp back alleys. Your body aches, a dull throb in your muscles from the previous night's grueling work. But the sense of satisfaction and the coins in your pocket outweighs the discomfort. You spend the morning wandering the streets, a different man than the one who arrived a few days ago. You still see the grime, the poverty, and the desperation, but now you also see the city's undercurrents, the hidden jobs and secret economies that keep it running. You pass a fancy apothecary, its windows filled with gleaming bottles and jars, and a strange detail from your time in the sewers flashes in your mind. Silas had mentioned something about the demand for a particular kind of ingredient that was only found in the most unsanitary places, a demand that kept some people employed in an even stranger job than his. As evening approaches, you find yourself at the edge of the city, where the cobbled streets give way to muddy tracks and the gas lamps are few and far between. The air here is different, less of the city's dense miasma and more of a damp, earthy smell. You're meeting Silas at a dilapidated pub, its sign hanging askew and its windows dark. Inside, it's a dim, smoky den filled with men who look like they've seen too much and smiled too little. Silas is sitting in a corner, nursing a cheap beer, and he gestures for you to join him. Another good day, you ask, and he just grunts, a cryptic reply that tells you everything and nothing at all. He introduces you to a man named Alistair, a lanky fellow with a long, thin scar running down his cheek. Alistair, Silas explains, is a leech collector. Your stomach, which had just started to settle, lurches. Alistair's job is exactly what it sounds like. He collects leeches from the stagnant marshes and ponds on the city's outskirts. These aren't just any leeches, they're medicinal leeches, highly prized by doctors for the practice of bloodletting, a popular, though often questionable, medical treatment of the era. The theory, you're told, is that removing bad blood from the body could cure a wide range of ailments, from fevers to headaches. Alistair's job is to keep the city's apothecaries and doctors well supplied with these little bloodsuckers. He tells you the pay is surprisingly good, a testament to the high demand for leeches and the danger of the job. He offers you a chance to come with him tomorrow, a day trip out of the city and into the murky waters of the marshlands. You're hesitant, to say the least. The thought of wading through muck, this time for living, squirming creatures, is a far cry from the inanimate treasures of the sewer. But the promise of more money and a day away from the suffocating city is a powerful lure. You agree, and Alistair claps you on the shoulder with a surprisingly strong hand. You meet Alistair at dawn the next day, and he leads you to a worn-down cart pulled by a weary-looking horse. You ride out of the city, the urban sprawl slowly giving way to open fields, and then to a landscape of low-lying swamps and marshes. The air, Once you're away from the city, is surprisingly fresh and clean, filled with the sounds of birds and the rustling of reeds. You can almost forget the grim nature of your destination. Alistair, who is more talkative now that he's out of the grimy city, tells you about his life. He came to New York from the farmlands of upstate, and like you, he struggled to find work. The leech collecting, he says, was something he fell into by chance, a desperate measure that turned into a grim but reliable profession. As you get closer to the marsh, the landscape becomes more ominous. The ground is soft and spongy, and the air is thick with the smell of decay and stagnant water. Alistair stops the cart near a small, reed-choked pond, its surface a murky brown. He hands you a long, thin stick and a large canvas sack. The trick, he says, is to lure 'em out. They'll latch onto anything warm. He then proceeds to roll up the legs of his trousers, revealing a patchwork of old, fading scars on his calves and shins. The sight makes your stomach churn. He explains that the most common way to collect leeches is by using one's own legs as bait. You're to wade into the water and let the leeches latch on, then carefully pull them off and drop them into the sack. Your first instinct is to refuse, to say no and walk away. But then you remember the empty feeling of your stomach a few days ago, the cold of the alley floor. You roll up your pants, your heart hammering a frantic rhythm in your chest. You step into the water, the cold shock of it making you gasp. The mud on the bottom is thick and grabs at your feet, and you have to struggle to keep your balance. The water is full of all sorts of unseen things, and you try not to think about what else might be lurking in the murky depths. Alistair, however, wades in with the confidence of a seasoned veteran. He points to a spot near a clump of reeds. They love the shallows, he says. You stand there for a few minutes, your legs going numb from the cold, and then you feel it, a small, tugging sensation on your calf, followed by another, and then another. It feels like a dozen tiny wet mouths are trying to suck your blood, which is, of course, exactly what they're doing. You grit your teeth and try not to scream, the feeling both repulsive and strangely fascinating. Alistair nods in approval. That's the stuff. Now, pull 'em off. He shows you how to carefully pry the leeches off your skin, a delicate dance of thumb and forefinger. You have to be quick but gentle, as tearing the leech will ruin it and make it worthless. The blood that seeps from your skin where the leeches were attached is a grim reminder of your profession. But Alistair says it's a small price to pay. He tells you a common fact about these creatures. They secrete an anticoagulant that prevents the blood from clotting, which is why doctors love them so much. It's a grisly but undeniable part of their usefulness. You start to get the hang of it, the feeling of the leeches becoming less of a shock and more of a routine sensation. You drop them into the sack, where they writhe and squirm against the canvas. The sound of them is a strange, wet rustle that you'll probably never forget. As you continue your grim harvest, Alistair tells you a little-known detail about the leech collecting trade. He says that some of the most sought-after leeches aren't from the marshes around New York, but from the wetlands of Hungary and France. These foreign leeches were considered to be of a higher quality, and smugglers would often try to bring them into the country, leading to a sort of black market for bloodsuckers. It's a bizarre thought, a smuggling ring for leeches. But in this world, nothing seems too strange to be true. He laughs, a hollow, bitter sound, and says, "The things people will pay for, eh? Your legs are a mess of small, red bites, and the blood that trickles down your shins looks like a macabre work of art. But the sack is getting heavier, And the thought of the money you'll get for this is a powerful salve for your physical discomfort. You're no longer just a poor boy from the country. You're a professional, a vital part of the city's medical supply chain, even if you're a part of the most repulsive part of it. Your job, as Alistair puts it, is to be a human buffet for the sake of science and dubious medicine. He also tells you a joke, a light-hearted jab to break the tension of the grim work. Why did the leech leave the poker game? He asks. Because he was bleeding them dry. You can't help but let out a small, tired laugh. It's a terrible joke. But in this context, it feels like a genuine moment of human connection. After several hours, Alistair signals that it's time to stop. The sun is starting to dip below the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the marsh. Your legs are numb from the cold and the endless stream of bites, and you feel a profound exhaustion settling in your bones. You and Alistair climb out of the water, and you have to struggle to pull the canvas sack, now heavy with its writhing cargo, out of the muck. The feeling of dry ground beneath your feet is a welcome relief. Alistair inspects the leeches, a look of professional satisfaction on his face. He says it's a good haul, enough to fetch a handsome sum. He hands you a few coins, more than he had promised, a gesture of appreciation for your hard work and your willingness to step into the grim world of leech collecting. You ride back to the city in silence, the sack of leeches between you, the sounds of the night, the distant barking of a dog, the faint cry of a street vendor, all seem to blur together into a single, monotonous hum. Your mind, exhausted from the day's work, is a blank slate. You've gone from scavenging through the city's waste to being the bait for its medical supplies. You wonder what strange job you'll be doing next. But for now, the money in your pocket, the promise of a warm meal, and a bed for the night are all that matter. You arrive back in the city just as the gas lamps are being lit, and the city, which seemed so alive and vibrant just this morning, now looks like a cold, indifferent monster. Alistair bids you farewell, his face a grim mask in the flickering gaslight. You're left alone on the street, your body tired and your mind a jumble of strange, unsettling thoughts. You've seen another side of the city, another part of its dark, churning underbelly, and you're starting to understand that in this world, survival means being willing to do things that most people wouldn't even dare to imagine. You are a leech collector, a human sacrifice for the sake of a flawed medical science, and you have a feeling this is just the beginning of your strange journey through the jobs of the Victorian era. The city has a million stories, and you're just starting to scratch the surface of its most disturbing tales. As you walk back to your rented room, the weight of the day's work heavy on your shoulders, you can't help but wonder what new horrors and strange jobs the city will offer you tomorrow. The past few days have been a brutal education, a crash course in the grim realities of survival. The darkness of the night feels different now, not just an absence of light, but a presence of secrets. You've gotten used to the grimy parts of the city, the hidden corners where life is a constant, desperate struggle. Your body, though still tired, is getting stronger, and your pockets, though not full, are no longer empty. The coins you've earned from being a tosher and a leech collector are a testament to your grim new life. But as you walk through the dimly lit streets, you realize there's a whole other side to this world, a more sinister one. It's a side of the city that deals in life and death in the most macabre way possible. You're a regular at Silas's Corner Pub now, a place where the air is thick with smoke, cheap liquor, and hushed conversations. Tonight, Silas is talking to a man you haven't seen before, a gaunt, fidgety character with hollow eyes and hands that never seem to stop moving. His name is Jeremiah, and he's not a scavenger or a leech collector. He's a resurrectionist. The name alone sends a chill down your spine. Silas sees your confused and slightly horrified expression and explains, resurrectionists, or body snatchers, as they were more commonly known, were men who supplied corpses to the city's burgeoning medical schools. With the strict laws on legal dissection, the demand for fresh cadavers far outstripped the supply, creating a gruesome but lucrative black market. Jeremiah, it turns out, is looking for a new partner, a strong lad who isn't afraid of a little dirt and a lot of dead people. The pay, he explains in a hushed tone, is staggering. A single fresh corpse could fetch more money than you could make in a month of toshering or leech collecting. The risk, however, is equally staggering. Getting caught meant a long stay in prison or, if you were unlucky, a swift and brutal encounter with a furious mob. But the thought of a life-changing amount of money is a powerful temptation. Jeremiah, seeing the internal struggle on your face, leans in closer. Think of it as a public service, he whispers, a hint of gallows humor in his voice. We're helping the doctors learn. We're advancing science. He tells you a popular historical fact that a lack of bodies for medical study was a huge problem, leading to a desperate need that people like him were only too willing to fill. The moral ambiguity of the job is a heavy weight, but the cold reality of your empty stomach just a few weeks ago is an even heavier one. You agree to meet him at midnight in the city's largest graveyard. The graveyard is a silent, sprawling city of the dead, its tombstones like crooked teeth in the pale moonlight. The air here is cold and still, filled with the faint scent of damp earth and decaying flowers. You meet Jeremiah by the wrought iron gates, a sack of tool shovels, a rope, a heavy canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He leads you to a fresh grave, the mound of dirt still loose and dark against the pale grass. New meat, he says with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. The grave belongs to a young man, a factory worker who died of a sudden fever, a tragedy that has now become a source of profit. The family has left flowers, now wilting and sad in the night air, and a small wooden cross with the name and a date barely a week old. This is the part of the job that sits the heaviest in your stomach, the grim reality of robbing a family of their final piece. Jeremiah sets to work immediately, his movements practiced and efficient. He uses a special method, a little-known detail of the trade, to avoid disturbing the coffin, instead of digging up the entire grave, which would take too long and be too noisy. He digs a hole down to the head of the coffin, then uses a metal bar to smash a hole in the lid. The sound is a sickening, muffled crunch that echoes in the silent graveyard. He then uses a grappling hook to pull the corpse out, a task that requires both strength and a grim indifference. Your job is to help him, to be the muscle, to help pull the body out of its final resting place and into the canvas bag. You can feel the cold weight of the body as you lift it, a lifeless, heavy thing, a stark contrast to the living, breathing people you see every day. The work is brutal and fast. You have to be quick to avoid the night watchman, and you have to be silent to avoid drawing attention. The whole process takes less than an hour, and soon you and Jeremiah are lugging the heavy bag out of the graveyard. A silent, grim procession of two. The body, a young man who was once someone's son, brother, or friend, is now just a sack of flesh and bones, a commodity to be sold. It's a moment of profound moral conflict, a gut punch of reality that makes the sewers and the leech-infested marshes seem almost idyllic. The money, though, the promise of a better life, is a powerful argument against your conscience. You try to tell yourself that you're just helping science, that the body would have just rotted in the ground anyway, but the words feel hollow and unconvincing. Jeremiah takes you to a discreet back alley behind a medical college, a place where a man with a lantern is waiting for you. The man, a young medical student, inspects the body with a professional detachment that is both impressive and chilling. He nods in satisfaction and hands Jeremiah a thick wad of bills. Jeremiah, in turn, hands you a small but significant portion, your cut for the night's work. The money feels heavy in your hand, a weight of both wealth and guilt. Jeremiah claps you on the shoulder. Easy money, right? No leeches, no shit, just a little digging. He tries to make a joke out of it, a gallows humor that you find you can't share. The transaction is over, and you walk away, the money in your pocket, the image of the young man's face in the graveyard burned into your memory. As you walk away, your mind is a jumble of thoughts. You're a body snatcher, a grave robber. You've crossed a line that you never thought you would cross. You're now a part of the city's grim secret economy, a cog in a machine that feeds on the dead. But a part of you, a small dark part, feels a strange sense of power. You've done something that most people would never dare to do, and you've survived. You're a survivor, a man who will do whatever it takes to make a living in this brutal, unforgiving world. You remember a quote you once heard: historians still debate whether the resurrectionists were a necessary evil for the advancement of medicine or simply greedy criminals exploiting the dead. You, a man who has just done the very thing they debate, now have your own grim perspective on the matter. It feels less like a debate and more like a simple choice between starving and surviving. You find yourself at a small, greasy spoon diner, a place where the coffee is strong and the food is hot. You order a plate of eggs and bacon, and as you eat, you feel a sense of unease. You look at the people around you, the factory workers, the shopkeepers, the police officers. They all have their jobs, their lives, their routines. They all have a sense of normalcy that you have completely lost. You are a shadow, a creature of the night, a man who makes his living in the most unholy of ways. The money in your pocket feels like a burning coal, a constant reminder of the moral compromises you've made. But as you eat the warm food, you realize that the moral ambiguity is a luxury you can't afford. You have a job, you have money, and you are no longer hungry. In this city, that's all that matters. You finish your meal, pay the bill, and walk out into the still dark streets. The city is starting to stir, the first rays of dawn painting the sky a pale gray. You walk back to your rented room, the image of the young man in the graveyard slowly fading into a blur of exhaustion. The city, which once seemed like a bright and promising place, now feels like a dark and unforgiving labyrinth. You found a way to navigate its darkest corners, but you're not sure if you've lost a piece of yourself in the process. You are a resurrectionist, a body snatcher, and you have a feeling that this is a job you will not be forgetting anytime soon. The city has a way of leaving its mark on you, and you can feel its grime and its secrets settling in your soul. The guilt of the previous night's work, a cold, heavy stone in your stomach, has faded into a dull thrum of exhaustion. You've earned a good sum, enough to buy proper clothes that don't reek of sewers or marsh water, and to rent a clean, if small, room in a boarding house. The world feels a little brighter, the food a little tastier. But you can't shake the feeling of being a ghost, a man who walks among the living but traffics in the dead. You're a part of the city's grim, invisible machinery, and you're starting to see the other cogs in the system. Today, however, the job is different. There are no sewers, no leeches, and no graveyards. Instead, you've been hired for a job so simple and bizarre it almost feels like a joke. The ad you saw on a post in a grimy alley read, "Wanted knocker up, strong lungs and a good arm required. Apply to Mr. Hawthorne, 14th Street." You find the address, A long, narrow alleyway behind a row of textile factories, the air thick with the smell of dye and cotton. Mr. Hawthorne, a short, stocky man with a handlebar mustache and a perpetual scowl, sizes you up with a skeptical eye. He hands you a long bamboo pole with a small brass knob on the end. "You got a strong arm," he grunts. You nod. "Good. You're hired. Don't be late. Not ever." Your new job is to be a knocker-up, a human alarm clock. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, factories needed their workers to be on time, often at ungodly hours before dawn. Not everyone could afford a watch or a clock, so the knocker-ups were hired to go from house to house, tapping on windows with a long pole to wake the workers for their shifts. It sounds simple, almost quaint, but as you'll soon find out, the job has its own set of challenges. Mr. Hawthorne explains the route, a convoluted maze of dark, narrow streets and tenement buildings. He warns you that getting a worker up is not always a simple tap. Some people are deep sleepers, and you'll have to be persistent, even to the point of being a mild nuisance. You start your route at 4 a.m., a time when the city is at its most silent and most vulnerable. The gas lamps are dim, and the streets are empty save for a few stray cats and the occasional drunk staggering home. The cold morning air nips at your nose as you walk, your bamboo pole a strange, awkward companion. Your first stop is a second-story window of a tenement building. You lift the pole, the brass knob gleaming in the faint moonlight, and gently tap against the glass. No response. You tap again, a little louder. Still nothing. You tap a third time, with more force, a sharp, insistent rapping that feels almost rude. Finally, a groan from inside, and a shadow moves behind the curtain. You wait for a moment to see the light of a candle, a sign that the worker is up. Then you move on. The work is a strange mix of monotony and urgency. You have a list of names and addresses, and a tight schedule to keep. Each tap on a window is a small moment of intrusion into someone's private world, a small act of forcing them back into the harsh reality of their working life. You learn to listen for the small sounds that tell you you've done your job, the creak of a bed, the strike of a match, the shuffle of footsteps. It's a job that requires a fine balance between being forceful enough to get the job done and quiet enough not to wake the whole neighborhood. You can't help but feel like a human mosquito, a buzzing annoyance in the night, but a necessary one. As you go from house to house, you realize there's a certain intimacy to the job. You're a part of people's routines, an unseen hand guiding them into their day. You tap on the window of a young woman who works in a textile factory, her face a pale blur in the window. You tap on the window of a family of immigrants, their voices a quiet murmur of a foreign language. Each tap is a small connection, a brief moment of shared existence in a city that often feels so big and impersonal. It's a far cry from the anonymity of the sewers or the grim silence of the graveyard. This is a job that is, at its core, about people. You remember a common historical fact about the knocker-ups. The job was a common one in industrial cities on both sides of the Atlantic, a simple solution to a complex problem. But you also learn a little-known detail from an old knocker-up you run into on the streets. A good knocker-up could tell a person's routine just by the way they reacted to the tap. A quick wake-up meant a dedicated worker. A slow, groaning wake-up meant a man who had a late night at the pub. It was a bizarre kind of psychology, a grim and silent reading of character. You, a man who has trafficked in corpses, are now learning to read the sleeping habits of the city's workforce. The hours pass, and the sky begins to lighten, the pale gray of dawn giving way to the soft orange of sunrise. Your arm, which you thought was strong, is starting to ache from the repetitive motion of tapping. The bamboo pole, which felt light at first, now feels heavy and cumbersome. But you've completed your route, and you've done your job, The city is waking up, its streets filling with the very people you just roused from their sleep. You see them walking to the factories, their faces tired but determined, and you feel a strange sense of ownership, a quiet pride in the fact that you played a small but vital part in getting them there. You make your way back to Mr. Hawthorne's office, and he gives you a day's wage, a few coins that feel clean and honest in your hand. The money isn't as much as a night of grave robbing, or even a good day of toshering, but it feels different. It feels like you've earned it in a way that doesn't leave a stain on your soul. You walk away from the alley, leaving the bamboo pole behind, and you feel a sense of relief. You've done a good day's work, a strange, simple, and honest job in a city of grim secrets. You are a knocker-up, a human alarm clock, and you have a feeling this is a job you could get used to. It's a job that, for once, doesn't feel like you're fighting for your survival, but rather helping others with theirs. It's a small, fleeting moment of peace in the dark, churning heart of the city, and you cherish it. You walk back to your room, the rising sun warming your face, a small smile on your lips. The city's rhythm is a complex thing, a constant beat of life and death, of work and rest. You've been a part of its silent, nighttime world and its early morning hustle. The money you've earned from the odd jobs has made your life a little more comfortable, but it's also given you a strange new perspective. You see the city not as a series of buildings and streets, but as a living organism with a million unseen parts. You've been a tosher, a leech collector, a resurrectionist, and a knocker-up. Each job, in its own way, has shown you a different, grim facet of survival. Tonight, however, your new job takes you to the dirtiest, most disease-ridden part of the city, a sprawling slum where the houses are packed together like sardines and the streets are rivers of garbage. You're meeting a man named Finn, a grizzled old Irishman with a face like a dried apple and a thick, calloused hand. He's a rat catcher, a profession that, in the late 1800s, was considered a vital, if unsanitary, public service. With the city's tenements and back alleys teeming with rats, a constant source of disease and death, men like Finn were hired to keep the vermin population under control. The ad you saw was simple: wanted apprentice rat catcher, strong nerves and a quick hand, inquire at the Dirty Mug. The Dirty Mug is a tavern so grimy the name seems less of a brand and more of a mission statement. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of stale beer, sawdust, and something else, a sour, musky scent that you quickly identify as a mix of unwashed people and, well, rats. Finn is sitting in a corner, surrounded by a small collection of iron cages, their wire mesh glinting in the dim light. Inside the cages, a few of the rats twitch and squeak, their beady eyes shining with a malevolent intelligence. Finn, seeing you, gives a toothless grin and gestures to a chair. "So, you want to hunt the little devils, eh?" He rasps, his voice a dry whisper. He tells you the work is hard, dangerous, and often thankless, but it pays a decent wage, a steady income in a city of feast and famine. The danger, he explains, isn't just the rats themselves, which can carry a host of diseases, but also the places you have to go to catch them. You agree. A sense of morbid curiosity and a need for steady work outweighing your revulsion. Finn hands you a pair of thick leather gloves and a long, thin stick with a metal hook on the end. "This here," he says, "is your best friend. A rat'll bite right through your hand if you let it. And believe me, you don't want that." He tells you the most common historical fact about rats in this era: they were the primary carriers of diseases like the bubonic plague. and a city's health was often judged by the number of rats it had. Finn's job, he says with a touch of grim pride, is to keep the plague from coming back. It's a bit of a dramatic statement, but you can see the truth in his eyes. Your first lesson begins that night. You and Finn walk through the slums, a place so poor and neglected it feels like a different city entirely. The streets are little more than muddy tracks, and the air is so thick with the smell of waste and decay, it's almost a physical presence. Finn leads you to a row of tenements, a maze of cramped, crumbling buildings. He points to a small hole in the wall, a dark opening from which a faint scratching sound emanates. There, he whispers, the breeding grounds. He explains that rats love these places, the warmth and the endless supply of garbage providing a perfect home. The trick to the job, he says, is not just catching the rats, but understanding them. You have to think like a rat, to know where they'll be and what they'll do. Finn teaches you a little-known detail about the trade. The best rat catchers didn't just use traps, they used ferrets. A ferret, a small, lithe animal, could be sent into the rat holes to flush the rats out, making them an easy target for a waiting rat catcher. The ferrets, Finn explains, were highly prized, and a good one could fetch a hefty sum on the black market. He, however, is a traditionalist. He prefers to use his hands and a stick, a more hands-on, if more dangerous, approach. It's all about the quickness, he says, his eyes gleaming in the dark. You gotta be faster than they are. He sets a trap, a simple box with a baited tripwire, and you wait. The silence is broken only by the scurrying of unseen feet and the distant wail of a child. It's a tense, nervous wait. But soon, there's a muffled snap and a squeal from inside the box. Finn, with a practiced motion, grabs the box and holds it up. Inside, a large, dark rat scurries frantically, its eyes wide with terror. He reaches in, his hand moving in a blur, and grabs the rat by the tail. It's a gruesome, terrifying sight, and you have to fight the urge to turn away. He then dispatches the rat with a quick, brutal blow from a small stick. The entire process is over in a matter of seconds. See, he says, holding up the dead rat. One less carrier of the plague. You try your hand at it, and it's not as easy as Finn makes it look. The rats are surprisingly fast and cunning, and your first few attempts are clumsy and slow. But with Finn's patient, if gruff guidance, you start to get the hang of it. You learn to listen for the tiny sounds, to anticipate their movements, to use your stick with a quick, decisive motion. You're no longer just a man with a stick. You're a hunter, a predator in a world of unseen vermin. You can't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction with each rat you catch, a small victory against the filth and disease that permeates this part of the city. Finn, seeing your progress, even offers a joke, a rare moment of levity. Why did the rat catcher get a promotion? He asks. Because he was outstanding in his field. It's a terrible joke, but in the context of the grimy, dangerous work, it feels almost charming. Hours pass, and the night becomes a blur of squeals, snaps, and the cold, unfeeling stare of the rats. Your sack of dead rats is getting heavier, a gruesome trophy of your night's work. The smell, a pungent mix of fear and decay, is starting to become a familiar, if unpleasant, scent. You're a part of the city's grim, nightly purge, a vital but unseen warrior in a war against vermin. You and Finn work in a silent rhythm, each of you a machine of grim efficiency. You are a rat catcher, a hunter of the plague, and you are starting to understand that this is a job that requires more than just a strong arm and a quick hand. It requires a certain kind of soul, a grim willingness to do a job that no one else will, a job that is essential to the health and well-being of a city that doesn't even know you exist. As dawn approaches, you and Finn head back to the dirty mug, the sack of dead rats a heavy, silent burden. The money Finn gives you is fair, a decent wage for a dangerous night's work. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that feels different from your other jobs. The sewers were grimy, the marshes were cold, the graveyards were chilling, but this feels different. This feels like you've been fighting a constant, losing battle against a creeping, insidious evil. You are a rat catcher, a warrior in a forgotten war, and you have a feeling that this is a battle that will never truly be won. The money you've earned from rat catching, like the money from grave robbing, feels tainted, but for a different reason. It's not the guilt of desecrating a grave, but the unsettling feeling of having waded through a river of disease and death. You feel a constant phantom itch on your skin, the memory of scurrying feet and beady eyes. The city's underbelly is more vast and more terrifying than you ever imagined. A grim ecosystem where every part of the chain of life and death is a potential source of income. Today's job, however, is a departure from the darkness. You've heard whispers of a different kind of scavenger, a mudlark, who works not in the sewers or the slums, but on the banks of the Thames River in London. You've made your way across the Atlantic, the sea journey a long and arduous blur, and find yourself in a city that is both familiar and alien. The air is different here, wetter and filled with the unique smell of the sea and coal smoke. The accent is different. The people's speech, a soft, lilting rhythm that is hard to understand. You're a stranger in a strange land, but the work, you hope, is a familiar one. You find the docks, a bustling, chaotic place of shouting men and creaking ships. The Thames River, a broad, muddy ribbon of water, is the city's lifeblood, and its banks, exposed twice a day by the tides, are a treasure trove for those who know where to look. You're looking for a man named Arthur, an old mudlark who, according to the dock workers, is the best in the business. You find him near a small wooden pier, a slight, wiry man with a face as weathered as the old wood of the pier itself. He's sifting through the mud with a long, hooked pole, his eyes scanning the glistening silt with an unnerving intensity. "Looking for work, are ya, son?" he asks, his voice a low, gravelly sound. You nod, and he gives you a weary, knowing smile. He's seen your kind before, desperate men, looking for a new start, willing to do anything. He explains the job. When the tide goes out, it leaves behind a rich layer of mud, a sort of historical graveyard of everything the city has lost or discarded. Your job is to sift through this mud, to look for anything of value that can be sold. It's a job that requires patience and a good eye. The mud, he explains, can contain anything from old coins and forgotten jewelry to bits of clay pipes, glass bottles, and even teeth. A common historical fact about the mudlarks is that they were often children and the elderly, people who were too weak for the heavy work of the factories or the docks, but who could still manage to spend a few hours in the mud. Arthur, however, is a professional, a man who has made a decent living from the river. You start your work as the tide recedes, the exposed mud a dark, glistening canvas. The smell is a mix of river water, decay, and something else, a faint, metallic scent of lost history. Arthur hands you a small spade and a burlap sack. Be patient, he advises. The river's not going to give up its secrets easily. You start to dig, the mud a thick, heavy substance that clings to everything. Your hands get cold and dirty, and your clothes become stained with the dark silt. It's a monotonous, back-breaking job, but the thrill of the potential find is a powerful motivator. You're not just digging in the mud, You're digging through history. Your first find is a small clay pipe stem, a relic of a forgotten smoker. It's not worth much, but Arthur says it's a good start. Every little bit adds up, he says. He shows you a little-known detail about the trade. The best finds are often in the deepest mud, where the items have been buried for decades, and where the most valuable treasures are found. He tells you a story of a mudlark who found a Roman coin, a relic from a time before London was even a city. The story is a bit of a local legend, a hopeful tale that keeps the mudlarks going, a sort of lottery ticket for the eternally hopeful. You, a man who has been a grave robber and a rat catcher, can appreciate the power of a good legend. Hours pass, and the tide has fully receded, revealing a vast expanse of dark, glistening mud. You found a few more clay pipes, a handful of old buttons, and a few bent nails. It's not a fortune, but it's a start. The work is physically demanding, a constant struggle against the mud that clings to your boots and the cold that seeps into your bones. But it's also a peaceful job, a quiet, solitary pursuit in the heart of a bustling city. You're a part of the city's unseen economy, a silent scavenger on the banks of a historical river. Arthur, in a rare moment of levity, offers a small joke. Why did the mudlark get a divorce? He asks, because he was always in hot water with his wife. It's a terrible joke, but you can't help but smile. In this grimy world, humor is a valuable currency, a way of dealing with the grim realities of your life. The two of you work in a comfortable silence, each of you a small, solitary figure on the vast, muddy expanse of the river. As the tide begins to turn, a slow, insistent rise of water that signals the end of your workday. You and Arthur pack up your findings. The money you get for your day's work is modest, but it's an honest wage, a fair price for your hard work. Arthur, seeing the exhaustion on your face, gives you a small nod of respect. You're no longer just a desperate man from New York. You're a mudlark, a scavenger of history, a man who knows the secrets of the Thames River. You found a new kind of survival in a new city, and for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of peace. The river has its own grim beauty, and you, a small, insignificant part of its daily rhythm, have found a new kind of home. The life of a mudlark, while grimy, felt almost peaceful compared to the grim horrors you'd faced in New York. There was a certain honesty to the Thames, a simplicity to sifting through the mud for forgotten treasures. But the peace doesn't last. The city of London, like New York, is a beast with 1,000 mouths, and it requires a constant flow of grim, unappealing labor to keep it running. You've heard whispers of a new job, a new level of dirt and degradation that makes the sewers and the muddy banks of the Thames seem almost clean. This job deals with waste, but not the kind you can sell. This job deals with pure. You find yourself in a squalid part of the city, a place of tanneries and leather workshops where the air is thick with a stench so profound it makes the sewers of New York smell like a field of flowers. The smell is a mix of rotting animal hides and something else, a sharp, ammoniacal odor that makes your eyes water. You're looking for a man named Mr. Finch, a tanner known for his ruthless efficiency and his demand for the most unusual of ingredients. The ad you saw was cryptic: wanted pure finder, good nose and an empty sack. Apply within. You find Mr. Finch's tannery, a dark, smoke-filled building with a courtyard full of animal hides soaking in foul-smelling vats. Mr. Finch, a burly man with a face as tough as the leather he works with, gives you a long, hard look. He holds up a piece of leather, its surface soft and pliable. This, he says, is a work of art. but it takes a special kind of ingredient to make it this way. He explains that the key to making good leather is the tanning process, and for certain types of high-quality leather, nothing works better than dog waste, or pure, as it was known in the trade. The enzymes in the waste were used to soften the hides and prepare them for tanning, a gruesome but essential part of the process. Your job, he says, is to be a pure finder, a collector of dog waste from the streets of London. The pay, he explains, is meager, but the demand is constant. The work is simple. You walk the streets with a bucket and a shovel, and you collect as much dog waste as you can. It's a job that requires a complete lack of shame and a very strong stomach. You agree. A sense of grim resignation settling over you. The money isn't great, but it's a steady income, a way to survive in a city that seems to have 1,000 ways to kill you. The thought of this being your new profession is a bitter pill to swallow, but hunger, a constant nagging presence, is a powerful motivator. You start your new job in the quiet hours of the morning, when the streets are still mostly empty, the air is still cold, but the smell of the city is already starting to rise. You walk with your bucket and shovel, a silent, solitary figure in a world that seems completely oblivious to your grim task. You learn to spot the pure from a distance, to recognize the subtle signs of a dog's passing. It's a job that is, at its core, about observation and a grim patience. You remember a common historical fact about the pure finders. The job was often done by women and children, people who were desperate for any kind of income. The work was considered the lowest of the low, a job of last resort. But you also learn a little-known detail from an old pure finder who sees you on the street and, with a grim sense of camaraderie, gives you a nod of respect. He tells you that the best pure was considered to be from certain breeds of dogs, and that some pure finders would even follow specific dogs around, waiting for their chance. It's a strange, almost absurd detail, a testament to the strange lengths people would go to in order to make a living. Hours pass, and your bucket, a heavy metal thing, starts to fill. The smell is a constant assault on your senses, a thick, nauseating presence that you feel will never leave you. But you keep going, your mind focused on the money you'll earn, the meal you'll buy, the warm bed you'll sleep in. The work is a strange kind of meditation, a repetitive, mindless task that allows your mind to wander. You think about the jobs you've had, the sewers, the marshes, the graveyards, the rats. You've been a part of the grim, unseen machinery of two great cities, and you're starting to feel like a part of the dirt itself. You find a small, greasy cafe, its windows steamy, and its air thick with the smell of cheap coffee and fried food. You can't bring your bucket in, so you leave it outside, a silent, malodorous testament to your profession. You order a cup of tea and a small sandwich, and as you eat, you look at the people around you, their faces clean, their hands unstained. They have no idea what you do, what you've done, the grim, dirty work that keeps their world running. You are a pure finder, a collector of dog waste, and you have a feeling this is a job that will leave a stain on your soul that can never be washed away. But as you eat, you realize that the money you've earned, the meal you're eating, the feeling of a full stomach is worth it. Survival in this world is not about dignity. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes. You are a pure finder, a ghost in the city's grim ecosystem, and you're starting to understand that in this world. The dirtier the job, the more honest the wage. The stench of the pure finding job, a constant ammoniacal presence, has settled deep in your clothes, your skin, your very soul. You feel like a walking advertisement for the grim underbelly of London. a man who has made his living from the city's most repulsive discards. But as always, survival demands a new, grim turn. You've heard whispers of a different kind of trade, one that is less about the living and more about the recently deceased. It's a job that takes you not to a graveyard or a sewer, but to a photographer's studio, a place where art and death collide in a macabre and unsettling dance. You're looking for a man named Mr. Abernathy, a local photographer known for his post-mortem portraits. In an era where photography was a luxury and child mortality was high, many families' only chance to get a picture of their loved one was after they had passed away. Mr. Abernathy's studio is a quiet, somber place, a world away from the noise and chaos of the streets. The air is thick with the smell of chemicals and old paper, a stark contrast to the stench of the tanneries. Mr. Abernathy, a frail, elderly man with a kind face and tired eyes, gives you a long, appraising look. He's looking for an assistant, a gurney fluffer, a grim title for a job that is both delicate and disturbing. The job, he explains, is to assist him in preparing the deceased for their final portrait. The work requires a steady hand, a gentle touch, and a complete lack of emotional attachment. You'll be helping to position the bodies, to make them look as though they are simply asleep. A grim charade to give grieving families a final, peaceful memory. The pay, he says, is surprisingly good, a testament to the sensitive and morbid nature of the work. The thought of this job, a final, intimate act with the dead, sends a chill down your spine that is far colder than the sewers or the mud of the Thames. But the need for money, a constant, nagging presence, is a powerful force. You agree, and Mr. Abernathy gives you a small, sad smile. "Welcome to the family," he says, his voice a low, somber whisper. Your first subject is a young girl, no older than 5, who passed away from a sudden fever. Her body is laid out on a gurney, her face pale and peaceful. Your job, as Mr. Abernathy explains, is to make her look alive. He shows you a little-known detail of the trade, a special wire armature, a sort of macabre puppetry that is used to prop up the bodies and make them look as though they are sitting or standing. You're to help him position the girl, to gently arrange her arms and legs so she looks as though she is just resting. The work is gruesome and heartbreaking. You have to fight the urge to cry, to scream, to run away, but you don't. You focus on the task, your hands moving with a strange professional detachment. The studio is a silent, somber place. The only sound, the soft click of Mr. Abernathy's camera and the gentle rustle of fabric as you position the girl. The air is heavy with a quiet sorrow, a grief that is almost palpable. You think about the sewers, the graveyards, the rats. Those jobs were about survival, a brutal, physical struggle against a harsh world. This job is different. This job is about death, about the emotional and psychological toll of a world where life is cheap and death is a constant, unwelcome visitor. You remember a common historical fact about the post-mortem photographers: they were considered to be artists, their work a form of grim portraiture that captured the final moments of a loved one's life. You, a man who has trafficked in corpses, are now an artist of a sort, a grim and silent assistant in a macabre and unsettling art form. Hours pass, and you complete your work. The girl, propped up and posed, looks as though she is sleeping, a small, peaceful smile on her face. Mr. Abernathy takes a few photographs, and then he packs up his camera. He gives you your pay, a few coins that feel heavy and cold in your hand. He doesn't say anything, but you can see the silent, shared grief in his eyes. You've both done a grim and necessary job, a final act of respect for a young life cut short. You leave the studio, the air of the streets a welcome, if grimy, relief. You walk through the bustling streets, your mind a jumble of thoughts. You've just spent the day with a corpse, not as a grave robber, but as an artist. You've helped create a final, peaceful memory for a grieving family. The work was gruesome, but it was also a strange act of kindness, a final tribute to a young life. You are a gurney fluffer, a grim artist, and you're starting to understand that in this world, even in death, there's a way to make a living. You can't help but feel a strange sense of pride, a grim satisfaction in the knowledge that you've done a job that few others would dare to do. You've seen the city's grim underbelly from 1,000 different angles, and you've survived every one of them. The city has a way of leaving its mark on you, and you can feel its darkness, its sorrow, and its grim determination settling deep in your soul. The macabre artistry of post-mortem photography, with its quiet sorrow and grim precision, left a deep and unsettling mark on you. The work, for all its darkness, felt like a strange kind of peace, but the city's grim carousel of jobs never stops turning. You've heard whispers of a new kind of work, one so bizarre and intimate it defies belief. This job doesn't involve dirt or death, but a kind of servitude that is both a great honor and a profound humiliation. This job is about royalty. You've made your way to the opulent, sprawling palace of the Queen, a world away from the grimy tenements and stinking tanneries you've come to know. The air here is different, clean and perfumed, and the streets are paved with clean cobblestones, not mud and waste. The people here are dressed in fine clothes, their faces not etched with the lines of poverty and despair, but with a kind of placid, aristocratic boredom. You're looking for a man named Lord Ashworth, a high-ranking official in the royal household, a man who, you've been told, is in need of a new groom of the stool. The name alone, a bizarre and slightly comical title, fills you with a sense of morbid curiosity. You find Lord Ashworth in a lavishly decorated antechamber, a stern, imposing man with a severe expression and a perfectly manicured mustache. He looks you up and down with an air of profound disapproval, as though you are a particularly unpleasant bug that has wandered into his parlor. He explains the job, a position that, in previous centuries, was one of the most intimate and trusted in the royal court. The groom of the stool was the person responsible for assisting the monarch with their personal hygiene, a bizarre and deeply personal form of service. The job, he explains, has evolved over the years, but the title and the spirit of the position remain the same. You will be in charge of the Queen's close stool, or portable commode, and ensuring her comfort and privacy during her most personal moments. The pay, he explains, is astronomical. A king's ransom for a job that is, at its core, deeply humiliating. The prestige of the position. The fact that you will be in close proximity to the Queen is a kind of social currency that few could ever dream of. You agree. A mix of disbelief, revulsion, and a grim sense of greed battling for control of your mind. The thought of being a human fly swatter, a personal attendant to the Queen's most intimate moments, is a profound shock to your system. But the money, the promise of a life of ease and comfort, is a powerful lure. Lord Ashworth gives you a look of disdain and tells you to report to the royal chamber at dawn. You spend the night in a small, impeccably clean servant's room, the soft bed and clean sheets a luxurious contrast to the grime and filth you've come to know. You can't sleep, your mind a jumble of thoughts. You've been a tosher, a leech collector, a resurrectionist, a knocker-up, a rat catcher, a mudlark, a pure finder, and a gurney fluffer. Each job was, in its own way, a descent into a new kind of hell. But this job feels different. This job feels like a final, bizarre act of humiliation, a complete surrender of your dignity for the sake of money. You report to the royal chamber at dawn, a vast, ornate room filled with gilded furniture and priceless tapestries. The queen, a small, elderly woman with a surprisingly kind face, is already awake. Lord Ashworth gives you a final, stern warning. Speak only when spoken to. Do not look at her directly, and for God's sake, be discreet. Your job is simple, if deeply strange. You're to wait in a small antechamber, the close stool, a beautifully carved wooden commode, at the ready. When the queen needs you, a small bell will ring, and you're to go in, assist her with her needs, and then discreetly remove the stool. You remember a common historical fact about the groom of the stool. The position was often held by a member of the nobility, a high-ranking official who was considered to be one of the king's most trusted advisors. It was a position of great power and influence, a strange mix of the intimate and the political. But you also learn a little-known detail from an old palace servant, a wizened woman who gives you a knowing smile. She tells you that, in the old days, the groom of the stool was often expected to taste the king's food and wine to ensure it wasn't poisoned. The job, she explains, was a position of great trust, but also great danger. You, a simple man from America, are now a part of this bizarre historical tradition, a human fly-swatter to the queen. The hours pass in a slow, agonizing silence. You wait in the small antechamber, your mind a jumble of thoughts, your heart a nervous drum in your chest. You've handled corpses, waded through human waste, and been a human buffet for leeches. But this job, this bizarre, intimate act of service, feels like the most surreal and humbling experience of your life. You are a groom of the stool, a personal assistant to the queen's most private moments, a human fly-swatter in a gilded cage. You can't help but feel a grim sense of irony, a bizarre humor in the fact that you, a man who has done the lowest of the low jobs, are now in the highest of the high places. It's a joke, a cosmic prank that you can't help but be a part of. And with the money you're earning, you'll be laughing all the way to the bank. The bizarre life of a groom of the stool, a strange mix of privilege and profound indignity, is a world away from everything you've ever known. The money is good, the living is easy, but the moral and psychological toll of a job that requires you to surrender your dignity is a heavy one. You've seen the highest and the lowest of the city's grim carousel of jobs, from the filthiest sewers to the most opulent royal chambers. You've been a tosher, a leech collector, a resurrectionist, a knocker-up, a rat catcher, a mudlark, a pure finder, a gurney fluffer, and a groom of the stool. Each job has left a mark on you, a grim scar on your soul, a grim education in the brutal realities of survival. But the city, you've learned, has one last grim trick up its sleeve, one final job that is a testament to the desperate lengths people will go to in order to make a living. You've left the palace behind, the clean, perfumed air and gilded halls a distant memory. You're back in the grimy, chaotic streets of London, a world that feels both familiar and alien after your brief sojourn into royalty. You're looking for a job, a final, honest day's work that will put an end to this grim journey. You've heard whispers of a job so simple and so dangerous it almost feels like a parody of your life. This job doesn't require a strong stomach or a steady hand. It requires a certain kind of innocence, a certain kind of desperate hope. This job is about being a crossing sweeper. You find yourself on a busy street corner, a chaotic intersection of horse-drawn carriages, vendors, and a constant swirling crowd of people. The street is a river of mud, horse manure, and refuse, a filthy, dangerous place where a wrong step could mean a broken leg or worse. You're looking for a small, waif-like child, a boy no older than 10, who is a crossing sweeper. He's a small, solitary figure in the middle of the chaos, a boy with a broom and a desperate, hopeful look in his eyes. The boy, who introduces himself as Tom, explains the job. He stands at a busy intersection, and his job is to sweep a small, clean path through the mud for the well-dressed ladies and gentlemen to cross without soiling their shoes. The hope is that they will, in turn, give him a small coin for his trouble. The pay, he explains, is almost non-existent. Some days, he gets nothing. Other days, he gets a few pennies. But it's a living, a desperate, uncertain living in a city that seems to have a million ways to crush a young boy's hope. You offer to help him, to be his partner. A decision that feels both kind and profoundly sad. You, a man who has done 1,000 grim jobs, are now a crossing sweeper, a partner to a young boy in a world that seems determined to crush his innocence. You and Tom stand on the street corner, your brooms in your hands, a grim and silent duo. The work is simple, if physically demanding. You sweep the mud, the horse manure, the garbage, into a small pile, creating a clean path for the people to cross. The work is constant, a Sisyphean task of sweeping a path that is constantly being resullied by the passing carriages and the endless stream of people. You remember a common historical fact about the crossing sweepers. They were often orphans or children from the poorest families, people who had no other way of making a living. It was a job that was, at its core, a testament to the brutal realities of child poverty in the Victorian era. As you sweep, you learn a little-known detail from Tom, a grim piece of folklore from the streets. He tells you that the best crossing sweepers weren't the ones with the cleanest paths, but the ones who could make the most sympathetic face. A sad look, a pathetic cough, a limp. These were the tricks of the trade, the little acts of theater that could tug at a person's heartstrings and earn a few extra pennies. You, a man who has trafficked in corpses and assisted a queen with her toilet, are now learning the grim art of acting for pennies. Hours pass, and the sun begins to set, casting long orange shadows on the filthy street. You and Tom have earned a few coins, not enough for a decent meal, but enough to buy a loaf of bread and a small piece of cheese. Tom, with a hopeful look in his eyes, thanks you. He says that today was a good day, better than most. You, a man who has earned a fortune from the city's grim secrets, feel a profound sense of sadness. The money in your pocket feels like a burning coal, a grim reminder of the fact that your grim, dangerous jobs have earned you more than a young boy's lifetime of honest, back-breaking labor. You are a crossing sweeper, a partner to a young boy's desperate hope, and you have a feeling that this is the saddest job of all. It's a job that requires you to surrender not your dignity, but your innocence, a precious commodity that is worth more than all the gold in the Queen's palace. The city, which once seemed like a dark, unforgiving labyrinth, now feels like a place of a million tiny sorrows. You've seen the grim, desperate lives of the people who make the city run, and you've been a part of their grim, desperate struggle. You've been a scavenger, a hunter, a grave robber, a servant, and now a crossing sweeper. You've done it all, and you've survived, but you have a feeling that this last job, this last grim act of survival, is the one that will haunt you the most. You walk away from the street corner, leaving Tom to his grim, hopeful life, and you can't help but feel a profound sense of sadness. The city has taken everything from you, your innocence, your dignity, and your soul. but it's also given you a grim education, a brutal knowledge of what it takes to survive in a world that seems determined to crush your hope. The city lights, once a source of fascination, now blur into a soft, hazy glow. The sounds of the bustling streets fade into a gentle, rhythmic hum, a lullaby of distant chatter and the soft rumble of a passing carriage. You find yourself drifting, the memories of the day and the long, strange journey fading into a soft, indistinct haze. The images of the sewers, the graveyards, the rats, and the Queen's Palace all blend into a single, flowing tapestry, a dreamscape of grim and unsettling beauty. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that feels less like a burden and more like a gentle, comforting weight. The world outside, with its grim jobs and its desperate hopes, is receding into the soft, comforting darkness. You are no longer a scavenger, a grave robber, a servant, or a crossing sweeper. You are just you, a small, insignificant part of the vast, silent night. The city sleeps, and you, a silent observer of its grim secrets, finally find a moment of peace. The day is done, the journey is over, and the long, strange road you've traveled has finally come to an end. Sleep now. Let the darkness take you. You've earned your rest.